Welcome in to Seahawks Today, powered by Chat Sports. Tyler Jones here with you. Appreciate you joining us. It is our mailbag edition of Seahawks Today. And the way that you can be a part of the show the next time we have a mailbag, which we do each and every week, is by subscribing to the channel. That's the only way that you can be a part. And what you do is you go to our community tab. Each week we ask you for your questions, and you have answers. Put it in the comments. Use that hashtag Seahawks, and we would love to respond and get your questions in so you can be a part of the next mailbag. YouTube.com/Seahawks TV. Hit the red sub button and get those questions in to be a part of next week's mailbag here on Seahawks Today. Our first question this week comes from Eddie. Eddie wants to know, who is going to be our quarterback? Hope not Drew Lock, LOL. Well, Eddie, that's a very good question, and on the minds of a lot of Seahawk fans right now, who will be the starting quarterback? They just brought in Geno Smith this week, signed him to a 7-year deal. Drew Lock is already there, and you have the possibility of drafting a quarterback, or maybe there's a move for Baker Mayfield, whether that's a trade or if he's a free agent. Jimmy G or Gardner Minshew's an outside possibility, but right now, if you stuck a gun to my head and made me choose, I would tell you I think that Drew Lock's the starting quarterback day one for the Seattle Seahawks at this point in time. Geno Smith, I don't think, is anything more than a backup in this league. He has been a career backup for quite some time now. Drew Lock, he's still relatively young at this point. He'll be entering his 4th year in the league. I'm not high on Drew Lock, but Pete Carroll seems to be, so I would put money on it right now that Drew Lock is the day one starting quarterback because of the money they spent on Geno Smith at $7 million compared to the $800,000 he made last season. That tells me that they don't have a whole lot of money right now to spend elsewhere on an outside quarterback. So my money would be on Drew Lock right now, but we'll see. I'm not feeling great about the idea of Drew Lock as the starter for the Seahawks at this point in time, but very good question there. Thanks for it. Let's go ahead and get to our next question in the mailbag. I'm just going to call this guy Papa. That's a mouthful there. Let's hear what the Papa has to say. Do you think Seattle should spend the first pick on Gardner and then wait until after the draft to trade for Baker Mayfield? Now, who he's talking about here is Sauce Gardner, Ahmad Gardner, the starting cornerback from Cincinnati. And personally, I think that he's the best corner in this draft. I love what I've seen from Sauce Gardner. We've talked about it on this show a lot, that he reminds me of Richard Sherman, which should excite a lot of Seahawk fans when you talk about Richard Sherman and possibly somebody that plays like him. If you're going to go corner high, that's your guy to go with. But I think there's other needs to address with that high pick for Seattle first, whether it's an edge rusher like Kayvon Thibodeau if he's still around, or an offensive tackle like Evan Neal. Those are guys I would look at first, but Sauce Gardner, I think, would be a pretty good pick. It's a part of the other question in a trade for Baker Mayfield at this point in time. I would like to see him trade for Baker, but I just don't feel confident that's going to happen right now. I think that the Seahawks, with as tight as they are money-wise and how far along they've gone down this Baker Mayfield rabbit hole, if you want to call it that, of how long it's been since he's been available and no moves been made. I just don't see that happening. I'd like to see him there, but I don't think it's going to happen. Very good question there. Let's get to our next one. This from Jared. Jared wants to know, do you think we are going to take any cornerbacks in the draft this year? And if so, what options might actually be there for us with whatever pick we use them on? Very good question there from Jared. I think, as we mentioned with Sauce Gardner, that's a possibility at 9, but another name I'd watch for is Trent McDuffie. And I think that the Seahawks are going to draft a corner within the first 3 rounds of this draft because there is a need right away for a starting corner. And I think that if McDuffie slides a bit, if we see him still around at about pick 19 or 20, that could be an opportunity for the Seahawks to trade back into the first round. I don't see them using a pick on McDuffie with number 9, but maybe you package your 2 second-round picks that you have back-to-back at 40 and 41, and you move in back to the first round to get McDuffie if he's still around potentially. So I do think that they get a corner. McDuffie's an option. I think Derek Stingley's an option potentially, even though I wouldn't like that pick at 9. I wouldn't like to pick a McDuffie at 9. But I'm willing to listen to the idea of Sauce Gardner at 9 potentially, although that wouldn't be my pick personally. But I'm willing to listen on that one. But very good question. We thank you for bringing that to us there. Let's get to our next one in the inbox. More Baker Mayfield questions. And there was a lot of Baker Mayfield questions this week, and we had to narrow it down a little bit. Do you think Baker Mayfield will be QB1 this fall? Man, Javier, I would love to if I was the decision maker. If all of a sudden John Schneider called me up and said, hey, what should we do at quarterback? I'd be telling John, go get Baker Mayfield. And I would love to see him there, whether he gets released and you sign him or you trade him and figure out a way for Cleveland to take on some of that contract. I think he's a gamble worth trying, but I just don't see it happening right now. With where this Seahawks team is at this point, with limited money to spend and what you did to already bring in Geno Smith, I just don't think that they bring in Baker at this point. But I don't rule it out. Now, I want to hear from you guys. This is your chance to weigh in. Drop us a comment. Are you on Baker Mayfield's side? You want to see him be the starter? What about Geno Smith, who didn't look too bad when he filled in for Russell Wilson last year? Or the new guy that's there, Drew Lock. Here's your chance to tell us. The first time we have done this poll involving these 3 quarterbacks, if you want Drew Lock, type DL. If you want Geno Smith, type GS. If you want my guy Baker Mayfield, type BM in the comments below. Maybe John Schneider and Pete Carroll are looking at the comments and trying to figure out what to do. But let your voice be heard. Type DL for Drew Lock, type GS for Geno Smith, or type BM for Baker Mayfield. We'll have an ad break here, so while the ad's playing, get your votes in, and we'll have more in just a moment. All right, next question. This comes from KH15. Will Evan Neal be available at pick 9? You know, we've been looking at these mock drafts the last several months, and Evan Neal was top 5 in most mocks when these mock drafts first started. And over the last couple of weeks, I've seen more and more the idea of Evan Neal landing at 9 to the Seahawks. So I think there's a very good chance that happens. And I think that would be a great pick for the Seahawks if they find him available at that spot. Evan Neal is a behemoth. He's 6'7", 350, plays like he's 300 pounds. This is a human being that is one of a kind. God knew what he was doing when he created Evan Neal. Let's put it that way. He was born to play football and born to play the tackle position. And you guys saw last year, this Seahawks team really struggled when we looked at the offensive line. So they could certainly use the help if they get it there from Evan Neal. He'd be a good find there. Speaking of Evan Neal, he is one of the many options in the draft for the Seahawks. And we talked about some draft rumors this week here on Seahawks Today. You can go back and watch that video as well as other videos from the channel. And the easiest way to do so is youtube.com/SeahawksTV. You can subscribe and see all of our draft coverage. We're going to have it covered leading up every single day to the draft here in just less than a week and a half or so. And the easiest way to do so, youtube.com/SeahawksTV for more Seahawks draft rumors and draft coverage. All right, another question. This one comes from Nicholas. Nicholas wants to know, let's go all defensive in the draft and draft a quarterback next year. What does your pure defensive draft look like? Thank you, Nicholas. I don't know why you're calling me Papa Jones. I'm only 25 years old. I'm not old enough to be anyone's papa at this point, but nonetheless, the ladies, they can call me daddy anytime. With that said, as producer Jeff is shaking his head with me saying that one, back to the point as far as defense goes for this Seahawks team. I think an all-defensive draft for the Seahawks, it's edge rusher, then it's inside linebacker, and then it's cornerback. And maybe corner goes before inside linebacker does, depending on what is best available there. And then defensive tackle is addressed. The only thing you don't really need to draft when you're looking at options for this defense is safety. I think you're really good with Diggs and Adams as your safety spots. But that would be what an all defensive draft looks like for me as far as priority goes. I don't think that they're going to draft all defensive players, although the defense needs a lot of help and they need young guys. I don't see that happening, but it wouldn't be the end of the world if they do. They do have too many needs when it comes to quarterback and offensive tackle to completely ignore the offense as far as that goes for me. But it's an interesting idea. Thanks for the question, Nicholas. Let's go ahead and get to another one. This one comes from William. William wants to know, how can we as fans get the message out to the front office that we need to draft people on the offensive line? Well, it's a great question. And the way that you can do so is by dropping us comments and being active on social media. Maybe you'll call up Pete Carroll or you'll knock on the door of the team facility and tell them, I don't know. I mean, as far as messaging goes, that's one thing. But to your point, as far as offensive line goes, we've talked a lot on this program about Evan Neal or Charles Cross. One name I would keep in mind, too, Tyler Linderbaum. Now, I have seen mock drafts that have him as a top 15 pick or even sliding to the third round. Was on Downey's show earlier this week, which I thought was nuts. But nonetheless, Tyler Linderbaum is a name to watch. Besides your typical left tackles we've talked about, if you want to go elsewhere on the offensive line, Linderbaum, to me, he reminds me of Creed Humphrey, the starting center for the Kansas City Chiefs. Was maybe the best rookie in the NFL last year. Apologies to Jamar Chase. But he was all pro out of the gates. Was really good, and Tyler Linderbaum feels like a carbon copy of Creed Humphrey. And Creed Humphrey was, a day two guy. So if Linderbaum slips up a bit, that could be a good option as well. Besides just those tackles, keep in mind Tyler Linderbaum. I think that he is a potential good find for the Seahawks if you want to go offensive lineman besides the tackle spot. A very good center that I like in Tyler Linderbaum there. Got time for one more question. Let's see what we have here from God Over Everything. He wants to know, Pete Carroll says that we're not rebuilding. I honestly believe that we are. What are your thoughts on this matter? I can't even see us making the playoffs. Well, if Drew Lock is your starting quarterback, yeah, this team's not making the playoffs. If DK Metcalf is traded, you are definitely in rebuild mode. That, to me, tells me everything about this franchise. What they decide to do with DK Metcalf in the coming days and leading to training camp, if they trade him off for draft picks or whatever it may be, then the rebuild is on, no questions asked. That, to me, is what I look at. When you go to the draft this week, within the last couple weeks here, $13 million to spend, and a team that has a lot of holes to fill, coming off just a 7-win season, and they are worse than they were last year. It feels like a rebuild, especially with not having that answer at quarterback right now. But, we've seen some crazy things happen. I think if you're the Seahawks, with as good as the NFC West is, you're not asking yourself to contend to win the NFC West. If you're hoping for anything, it's one of those wild card spots at this point. So for me, I would lean towards yes, the rebuild is on, but I don't have a definite answer on that until we figure out what this team does with DK Metcalf. Whether he gets that extension or whether they trade him, that's when we'll know the answer to that question. What do you guys think? Are the Seahawks a playoff team? Type Y for yes, type N for no, as far as it goes for this team this year in 2022. Y for yes, N for no. Let us know what you think. Thanks for joining us today here on Seahawks Today.